Get your scalpels and your pink drinks at the ready. The dentist will see you now. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 258 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighbour host, Mr. Dre Harrison. Good to see you as always on YouTube, or if you're listening in, where all good podcasts are available. Spoiler alert, kids, we're in the second half of a doubleheader. We're all tired. It's all dark outside. We've barely got any light. But we're going to make it through because the excitement of an all-time classic MotoGP race is keeping us together right now. Isn't that right, Ryan King?
Yep. Oh, man. I was worried that finish was not going to go the way I thought it was going to go. Well, it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. But it turned out better.
Somehow it turned out even better.
Say hi, Cam Buckley.
Hello, everyone. Man, it's going to be a lean year as a Honda fan, ain't it? God damn. Even on a power track, they just can't do shit.
Well, look at it this way. You should look at this race and go... Well, you should probably just think that, hey, Taka Nakagami gave us some hope.
No, what I think is they made a bike slower than last year's bike. Taka is better than we all thought he was. I always thought he was that good. I was first on this. I was day one stan.
No. I was the day one Nakagami stan. I was on Twitter talking about, is this man ever going to win a Moto2 race? Until he did El Assen in that race that was rained off, and I was like, yes, Taka! Let's get it.
Despite this, we can feel good for the other day one stand in the server. Mr. Ryan Eric King.
Man's friggin' spoilt right now.
Yeah, it was.
He might have the best bike on the grid.
Last year we definitely were not saying that.
What, when you were yanking out engine mounting bolts to make the bike faster?
Look, I swear, I said it at the end of the year. I thought, if Paul Espargaro leaves this team, the project might be dead. And in the space of 3 races in 15 days, first win in the class, first pole position in the class, first win for a Portuguese rider in MotoGP, first win for a South African rider in the class. And now we're talking about the overarching story being Tech 3's first win after over 20 years in the top flight. We'll get into all the nitty-gritty details.
There was people thinking, remember how people were thinking, wow, what a mistake leaving Yamaha was.
Now,
look at them now, bitches.
Now, I think it's important that we, let everyone know how we got here at the Styrian Grand Prix.
Oh, yeah, because it was a trip.
We'll get to that very, very quickly. We'll get the general housekeeping out of the way super fast. We're on youtube.com/motorsport101. If you're watching this right here, hi, thanks for watching. Why not subscribe while you're at it? Hit the bell, get notifications of when we're live on here. Check out our watch party as well, where we watched the whole Indy 500 together, and Cam's had a very audible fuck, like the angry video game there. It was great. We're on Facebook.com.
I just said fuck from the bottom of my heart.
It was a deep and cavernous F-bomb. It was a facebook.com/motorsport101 or on Twitter. Our handles are all beneath our names on the screen, in the description. But if you're listening in, we're at Harrison101HD, we're at Ryan Eric King, and we're at CBuckley917. RJ's on vacation, so it's just the 3 of us this time round. Sorry about that, he'll be back next week. And if you want to follow our podcast on Twitter, you can at Motorsport_101. And if you really, really like us, you can back us financially on Twitter? On Patreon. Whoops. Patreon.com/motorsport101.
The last thing the world needs is financially backing people through Twitter.
No, bad idea. We're on patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all the audio versions of our shows before they're released to the general public. $10 gets you in the supporters club of our Discord server, where you can listen to these shows live as they're being recorded, or watch them live, and you get the early access versions of all the full video podcasts in full. I also love that RJ said we accept Cash App, Vimo, Coffee Gold, and OnlyFans. Do I look like Bella Ford to you, RJ? In second thought, don't answer that.
Oh, God.
And you can find all of those details, and not our OnlyFans page, on Motorsport101.com, our official website. And let's get into the nitty-gritty of how we got to this absolutely crazy point in Styria. And the madness started in qualifying, I would argue. Maybe even you could go into the stewarding decisions that we talked about with the Grand Prix itself, because we had a stewards meeting, again, about like 11 days late, given the nature of the awful incident we had between Morbidelli and Zarco. For those who didn't listen to 256, they had a stewards meeting on Thursday morning and determined that Johan Zarco was at fault for the incident. I mean, the camera angles made it pretty clear that Zarco pretty much cut Frankie up and doing that on a 190 mile an hour braking zone probably isn't the best idea.
For those of you who may not be familiar with MotoGP, if you've ever watched Formula One, you know how Max Verstappen has the move where he weaves in a braking zone, crosses over someone's line? That, but on a motorcycle in the middle of a turn.
Yeah, where bikes don't have that sort of agility. You can't just move your bike out of the way to avoid it.
Well, it's a similar situation where if you get up behind someone and they cut right in front of you, you get sucked in on the slipstream, just like an F1 car gets sucked in on the dirty air.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
you ain't got
bad things happened.
Yeah, Zarco was deemed at fault. He was given a pit lane start for the race itself whenever he was due to come back. Because at the time, he was actually deemed medically unfit to race. He was still recovering from the broken wrist he suffered from that same incident, but he actually gave it a go on Saturday instead. And you'll be shocked at this one when you find out where he ended up after that. But he was given a pit lane start. There was also a warning given to Petrix after his double-fisted reminder to the Aprilia garage that he was gunning for pole position. Also, I think I can
telling
say
Aprilia that they were number one.
Exactly, twice. And shout out to our friend of the show, Lewis Sotheby, for uploading that on Giphy, so you can now find it publicly if you search Petrucci on social media. Good one, Lewis.
Phenomenal content.
You legend. What a man.
Superb content.
I stand that man. And by the way, it was his birthday earlier this week, so happy birthday, Lewis, if you're listening out there. He hit the big 3-0 earlier this week, so happy birthday, Lewis. We love you, man. Enjoy your 30s. Thank God I'm not there for another couple of years yet. We love you, man, and we miss you. But, that was a warning there. No further action on the KTM incident as well, but I still find it baffling that we're having a stewards meeting 4 days after the fact. But hey, here we are. Qualifying was also mental. Johan Zarco made Q2 4 days after surgery on a broken scalpioid.
Yeah.
I've got nothing.
Regardless of how the man rides around others, he is fast. That is one thing he has always been, is fast.
He qualified on the front row. Like third on last year's Ducati with a broken wrist. What? It was ridiculous. The front row, and I'm not adding names here just yet, was, quote, a KTM, last year's Honda, and last year's Ducati. And the Suzuki was fourth.
Now,
what?
If you told me that was going to happen at any track, let alone Austria, at the start of this year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got nothing.
Yeah, I got nothing. Pol Espargaro added an E to his name. His first career top flight pole position.
Pol Espargaro!
In one of the closest qualifying sessions I've ever seen. I'll put it into context for you. Pol Espargaro was on pole position. Taka Nakagami on last year's Honda was second.
Let's go, Taka.
Yeah. Let's go, Taka. He was 200ths away. Johan Zarco was third, half a tenth off pole position. Mind-boggling. Jack Miller was 0.120 of a second off pole position. Fifth. Not even on the front row. You go down a little bit further. Right. And let's not forget, Jack Miller was in hospital after that day's qualifying because he had damage in his muscles in the shoulder. So he was in a hospital wing, hours after this qualifying session.
That's the running theme now for MotoGP this year. Everyone is the walking wounded.
Yeah. Simon Patterson worked it out. He's the 7th rider to have seen a hospital wing so far this season out of 22 full-time runners. A third of the paddock has seen a hospital wing as a direct result of their injury so far this season.
How many races have we had?
5.
Bruh. We're averaging more than one per weekend.
At that point, 4.5. Jack Miller was 5th, 1/10 off of pole position. Fabio Quartararo was 0.286 off pole position. 10th! The top 10 was covered by less than 0.3 of a second. It was Fabio Quartararo's worst qualifying since debuting in the top flight at the start of last year. That's how close this was. We're looking at feet and inches separating some of these dudes over the line. I think as a top 10, I think it might have been the closest in MotoGP history in terms of qualifying. Only 0.6 covered the entire top 12. And Frankie and Petrux were significantly further back compared to everybody else. But absolutely ridiculous qualifying session. It was absolutely bonkers. Just absolutely insane stuff in qualifying, and that was just the qualifying session. You fast forward to the race, and
yo, what the fuck?
You scroll past like 3 or 4 laps, and then you go, wait, is that Joan Mir taking the lead? Mir in the leading group, like I said, in a Suzuki on a power track.
The most power track. How?
Do you remember how I said on last week's show that I think Mir might kick on and gain a lot of confidence from his first podium finish last week?
Yeah, I was in the same boat, and yep, you were right.
The leading group was Mir, Miller, and Nakagami. Could you have ever imagined this?
Nope.
Even 3 years ago?
Not in my wildest dreams.
At Austria.
In Austria, a track that Ducati has won every single time since they debuted here in 2016.
Nope. Not Austria. Styria.
Shut up.
It's a distinct event with its own lineage and history.
Its own lineage, history, and national anthem, or regional anthem, which sounds like a remix of a Ramenstein song, which I thought was hilarious. The leading group was Mir, Nakagami, Miller, and then you had the second group of Pol Espargaro, Alex Rins, Brad Binder, Miguel Oliveira, Dovi. Iker Lecuona was in there on the second KTM. Hervé Poncharola made out that, like, oh, don't worry, you guys, Lecuona's starting to get it together now. I didn't believe him, and now he's running in the top 10. At one point, we had all 4 KTMs in the top 8.
I think their technical chief had a nosebleed at some point.
Was that before or after the coke? After he clearly couldn't believe that all 4 of his bikes are in the top 8 positions.
He's just out here saying, like, guys, where's the shuttle to the hospital? I need to go along with the riders there too.
Yeah. Before I yeet myself out of this window. Like, Dovi was running 8th. Quartararo was in 10th, struggling to control his brakes. Because he already had multiple runoffs like over the course of the weekend. I think he had 3 or 4 in the practice sessions.
This is a recurring theme with the Yamahas.
Yeah,
the Yamahas.
Rossi was down in 11th. He had Maverick and Alex Marquez and Cal. You had some big names in the lower end of the field. Like Johan Zarco was clawing his way back through the field after, like, the pit lane start is nasty. They don't release you from the pit lane until the bikes are way past turn 1 down the back straight. So
yeah, this track is a big penalty. It's
a massive penalty. Like, they are way, he was 15, 16 seconds, I reckon, behind the leader when they actually released him. But at one point, he was the fastest man on track, which again is just ridiculous.
We can't hear you. King, we can't hear you.
Oh, now it's unmuted. Okay.
We're keeping that.
Oh, Lord. I have a feeling this has been here for a while, but I probably just noticed it in Austria for the first time, where at the end of pit lane they have a mini grid on pit lane for everyone to line up for pit lane starts. Which
that's been a thing for a little bit.
Yeah, because I know why it's a thing. Because Dre, you remember that German Grand Prix?
Oh yes. The German Grand Prix, the one at Silverstone that had to be delayed due to a rain start, where everybody came in on the warm-up lap, changing to the wet bikes, and it was all logjam, and they had to red flag it. The German Grand Prix, as you mentioned, I think it was 2014, where Stefan Bradl was on a hybrid bike on his own on the grid, and like 3/4 of the grid were in the pit lane. That's why the grid spots are there now. But I'm glad. Great reference there, King. I'm glad you remembered that one. But yeah, absolutely right. That's why those grid spots are now there. But the time we were watching this, we couldn't believe what we were seeing, because by lap 8, by 16 or 18 or so, Joan Mir is breaking free from Jack Miller. Now I wondered how much of that was Miller maybe handling the pain of the shoulder, maybe he was fading in terms of endurance as the race went on, but Mir had pulled out a good 2-second advantage. And we're all sitting here thinking, well, barring a miracle, Joan Mir's going to win, and we're going to have another brand new winner in MotoGP. I was more right than I realised on this one, but not the name I expected it was going to be, because just when Mir is about to break off, and it looks like it's going to be a comfortable win for the young Spaniard on the Suzuki, we see a Yamaha in the air fence on fire. What had happened... And this is a terrifying incident again. And could somebody please give poor Maverick Vinales a break? Because he's had the week from hell. We all know what happened last week of the incidents with Zarco and Morbidelli. But this time, he suffers he suffers
have a normal Sunday ride.
Right.
Please.
He suffered a complete and catastrophic brake failure on the run-up to turn 1 at 190 miles an hour. Maverick squeezes the brakes, finds out they're not working. Front disc explodes, and if you're a bike rider, you have this one button designated in your head for a moment like this. It's the eject button.
Yeah,
and you know what that means.
Fuck off. Get the fuck out. He jumped off his motorcycle at
140. Oh, yeah, it was 140 miles an hour. Yeah, 225 clicks in Queen's English, but 140 miles an hour. I've seen this happen a couple of times before. It's that eject button when you're a rider. You don't. It's almost what you kind of have to teach yourself what to do if you know your brakes are failing, because there's only one way this ends otherwise, and it's you in a fence.
Consider the alternative that your best option is to leap off of a motorcycle at 140 miles per hour. That's your best option here.
That's the best option. There's a couple of horror examples. I remember Leon Haslam at the British Superbike Championship finale a couple of years ago, where he's going down the hill into Brooklands at Brands Hatch, and his brakes fail at 170. Haslam immediately jumps off his bike at 170 mph, gets flung across Brooklands gravel trap into the air fence, breaks his ankle, breaks his wrist, and he had to be carried onto the championship celebration by his dad, Ron, so he could hug him. He insisted he wanted to go over and hug and congratulate Shaky Byrne on winning his, I want to say it was his 6th BSB title, and it's quite an iconic shot. We used it as a thumbnail on Bike Live. It was a very powerful image. It was Ron Haslam carrying his son to the podium after a horrendous accident, and a title that I think Haslam lost by 2 points in the end after a ridiculous showdown format. And the other one I can remember, I think Cam might remember this one, World Superbikes a couple of years ago when Eugene Laverty he collided with Alex Lowe's down the hill at Imola towards the back end of the back end of the circuit down the hill, and Lowe's fender jams in Laverty's brake, and Laverty has to jump off at 150 miles an hour. And
remember the image of Laverty mid-air.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like the record scratch freeze frame meme.
Right. He's jumped off the bike. The bike
Ugh.
goes into the wall and literally explodes. It's a fireball. It's something out of a cartoon. If you ever find it, you will see exactly what I mean. It is a terrifying incident.
And then what I'm more familiar with, of course, is last year we were talking about it at the in the Endurance World Championship for motorcycles, the Bull Door. One of the bikes dropped oil all over the track.
Oh, yeah.
Right in one of the critical braking zones around Paul Ricard.
Oh, God.
And multiple bikes got caught up, flew into the air fence, and we see the camera cuts away from the leader, and it's on fire.
Remember the Suzuka 8 hours? Fire. Remember the Suzuka 8 hours?
Yeah, when they dumped oil.
Yeah.
And you think of how marginal. Yeah, and you think of how marginal Suzuka is with motorcycles and the nature of turn one at Suzuka. Yeah. It's tough enough in cars, let alone motorcycles. Let alone motorcycles when there's fucking oil on the ground.
Exactly, yeah. In MotoGP ran the numbers on the incident. His brakes fail. He peaks at 295 kilometers an hour. It's about 185 in Queen's English. He jumps off at 140, having realised the brakes failed. And the bike goes on and hits the air fence at the top of the track at 100 miles an hour. And
yeah, effectively, from when he jumped off, nearly unabated speed.
Honestly, I'm not exaggerating. If he doesn't jump off that bike, he's a dead man. He's going into the catch fence at 100 miles an hour.
I mean,
Maverick would not be here.
Yeah, that's literally the only option. Like, I don't think any rider would stick onto the bike with failed brakes.
No,
it's just too dangerous because obviously with only two wheels, you have brakes on each end. But if the brakes fail on a bike, you don't really have anything, because if you just lock the rear, then you're just going to dump the bike.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, they ran the numbers, and that bike hits the catch fence at 100 miles an hour and immediately catches fire, and I immediately had very stark flashbacks to what happened to Louis Salom. The way he perished, unfortunately, was virtually identical. A bike goes into the catch fence with Salom, no runoff, like very little runoff compared to them and the wall, and that's ultimately what cost him his life.
We didn't address this, but in the wake of last week's massive crash with Zarco Morbidelli, they actually did add wall and some low air fencing to the corner, to which everyone said, what the hell is that going to do? Because that wouldn't have stopped either of those bikes. All it would have done is catch both of those riders in a guardrail.
Yeah. And I described it on Twitter as like putting a plaster over a gunshot wound.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not expecting them to radically change everything in 7 days, of course not. But I'd argue that actually might have made the situation somewhat worse.
I would say it did.
And I saw Matt Oxley tweet a prediction that they might just run the asphalt straight down and put a new right-hander in a dead straight line from where turn 1 and turn 3 end up meeting and squaring that whole corner off. That would make a lot more sense as a straight braking zone as opposed to one that's got a curve sweeping before it. We'll have to wait and see. But
yeah, well, the good thing as well is that we talked about it when we addressed the last incident. The infield at the Red Bull Ring is basically empty other than the pit facilities.
Yeah.
They can do that theoretical straight line, cut off that part of the track, create a new right-hander, and not affect the main circuit whatsoever. And just make that the bike track.
Yeah. Do what you got to do. You've got options here. You know, hopefully they will listen. because the riders, like Cal Crutchlow was one of the most vocal advocates of changing this up, and hopefully they listen, because when I always have a level of respect for Cal, because he always gives 100% of what he's feeling. He's always very, very honest, often to his own detriment at Honda sometimes, but it's often for the greater good, and this is one of those examples. So, thankfully, MotoGP immediately red flagged it when they saw. I mean, if an air fence goes up, it's an automatic red flag for obvious reasons. It's a huge safety risk.
Well, so love how Maverick. I didn't end up watching this race live. I'm a little disappointed, but I did get to watch Super GT instead. Watch Super GT, everyone. But I was watching the replay, and I saw Maverick's reaction, where he gets up, and then there's the camera angle. He gets up, looks over at the bike, like, oh, I wonder if I can get back on this. Looks at it on fire. It's just like, I'm not fixing that. So yeah, the air fence goes up in smoke alongside the bike. Red flag was immediately called. We got the usual quick restart procedure. It became a 12-lap sprint race. And this did come into play tactically, because I don't know how many of you guys remember the 2011 Monaco Grand Prix in Formula 1, where Sebastian Vettel was on a one-stop strategy. I think he had Fernando Alonso and Jenson Button behind him on two stoppers on much fresher tyres, but they couldn't find a way around Sebastian because it's Monaco. Of course he can't. And just when it was getting to a crescendo point, could Vettel's tyres explode, or is he going to drop off so much that they might find a way around him? I think it was that incident where Pastor Maldonado goes into the wall at Tabak. They red flag it. They change the tyres. And that completely kills the intrigue in the race, because Vettel got a get out of jail free card because he was able to change his tyres during the red flag. And I think that rule got scrapped after that race. It kind of played out quite similarly here in MotoGP. This was very interesting because Joan Mir didn't have a new front tyre left. It's almost the opposite situation.
Yeah, it's
Everyone
the opposite.
Else got to play with new tyres.
I think a lot of the teams in hand kept one set of tyres available just in case they got another red flag. Because look, we had 6 races in Styria over the last 2 weeks. 3 of them had a red flag involved at some point. And
it's like Singapore with safety cars.
Exactly. And as a result, Mir had to keep a medium front tyre that was already 20 laps old. And it showed because some of the other guys around him on the field were able to change their tyres and put a fresh set on, some of them softer in case, because they knew it was only going to be a 12-lap race, so they could afford to be more aggressive on their tyre choice and obviously push harder. And it showed because all of a sudden, in the second restart, they're going at qualifying speeds. Like,
no tyre conservation, just drop the fucking hammer.
Yeah, Pol Espargaro had the fastest lap of this second restarted race. It was only 8 tenths off the all-time lap record that Marc Marquez set here last year. Like, the all-time lap record was a 23.0. Pol Espargaro on lap 4 did a 23.8. They were going at qualifying speed, with, obviously, bikes that were shorter fueled, new tyres, bedded in. It was qualifying runs, and the pace was visibly faster on the second restart, and Mir got shuffled up in the end. He ended up falling back to 4th in the end. He was in the second group, and I was like, oh no, they've let Dovi in here, because Dovi's now with the leaders, and it's like, oh great, Dovi's just going to pass all these dudes and win, isn't he? No, Dovi just didn't have the pace this time round, and this was a hectic team fight, and it ended up going down to the final lap of the race, and it's a leading group of 3 between Pol Espargaro, Jack Miller, and Miguel Oliveira, who had passed his way through the other KTMs, had passed Dovi, had passed Mir, and is now running 3rd and trailing behind the leading group. Now,
the dentist lurks.
Not to get in too much of a tangent here, right? But you guys didn't see the BT Sport feed, and I am not. I'm normally a broadcaster's worst nightmare, because I'm normally very critical of broadcasters on this podcast. But Neil Hodgson, who was commentating this race, former
I saw the clip.
British,
I didn't.
yeah,
When
former,
I watched the race,
yeah.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, former World Superbike champion and now full-time pundit and commentator for BT Sport. He spotted this straight away, and I have to say, it's one of the most impressive bits of motorsport broadcasting I've seen in a very long time. He spotted Pol Espargaro's pit board when the final lap started. The board said +0. He's implying that Jack Miller is directly behind him. Now, Hodgson immediately would go on to say on commentary, that's a very bad idea, because the gap isn't +0. It was 0.3 going over the line to start that final lap.
Yeah,
and
+0 is on your rear tire, ready to overtake you.
Right. It wasn't. It was +3 going over the line. It was 0.3. And Neil said, well, no, if he just does another 24-1, he'll win the race. Just do another lap like you did before, and there's no way Miller will have the pace to overtake you. And Pol would admit after the race that he saw the board, he saw +0, and he assumed that Miller was directly behind him, because what happens? He takes a defensive line into turn 3. He hasn't got a +0 gap, it's a 0.3 gap, and then that 0.3 gap evaporates once he goes through turn 3, because he's gone defensive, squared the corner off. Miller's taken the normal racing line, and now all of a sudden he's right on Pol Espargaro's rear end, and the gap really is +0 this time.
Yeah.
Especially with that
and then,
sweet Ducati power off the corners.
Yeah, like, his team literally lost in the race, where I understand what his team's doing. Basically saying, hey, you know, you're racing someone for the win here, without realizing, hey, your rider's just going to assume he's about to overtake. He's going to take the defensive line, which is not the optimum line, just to fend this person off, even though it just gives the attacking rider the opportunity to actually catch your rider.
It was like the it's like Fisichella in the 2005 Japanese Grand Prix. 2 laps in a row, he defended against nothing but clean air going into the Casio Triangle.
It's like, congratulations, you played yourself.
Yup.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, because Jack Miller would then immediately pass Pol Espargaro into turn 4 down the hill. And next thing you know, Jack Miller's leading. I'm getting the Jackass theme ready to go on Discord thinking, come on, Jack, second win, here we go. And they're effectively, like, again, Pol is really good in Sector 3, so he's now trailing behind Jack. He's come out of the twisty parts now. He's coming back into the trees. The final 2 corners of the track, like, Pol Espargaro is going to go for it. You know exactly what's about to happen here. Of course he's going to go for it. Pol goes for the turn 9 dive bomb. He gets it. He runs it a little bit wide. Naturally, of course, he's squaring the corner off at turn 9. Turn 10, the turn of destiny. We've seen so many races won or lost in Austria. Marc Marquez, D'Andrea Dovizioso, Francisco Bagnaia before as well. All won or lost races on turn 10, the turn of destiny. Remember that, it becomes important later in Moto 2 as well. But of course Jack Miller's going to throw the block pass on the final corner. He does it. He kind of gets it. He pushes Pol Espargaro off the apex. He goes off the curb. And then next thing you know, on the inside of the shot, Miguel Oliveira, who was in 3rd, takes the normal racing line, comes through, beats them both, takes the lead and wins! Miguel Oliveira wins his first ever MotoGP race.
The dentist
over Jack
cometh.
Miller. The dentist! History was made. The first Portuguese top flight winner in MotoGP history. The first ever win for Tech 3 in MotoGP after 20 years in the top flight and a pair of 250cc wins. Yeah, remember that era? Yeah, after 20 years in the top flight, Hervé Poncharal has a top flight victory.
Oh, but he had a fucking breakdown.
Yep.
He was crying. He was hugging everybody he could find. Hervé's been in this sport nearly 40 years. Hervé Poncharal's been in the sport. nearly 40, and Poncharas finally got, with his team, a W. And there were tears, they were jumping up and down, the Tech 3 team had lost their minds. This is a team that we all thought was crazy for walking away from Satellite Yamahas a handful of years ago.
Oh my god, up until this year, they were crazy for leaving the Satellite Yamahas.
Oh god, yeah, Jesus. And Miguel Oliveira wins the race. And let's not forget, Miguel took a complete pot shot at Pol Espargaro after the last week's race when he claims he was taken out by Pol. He said, well, some runners just have different intelligence. And
he showed it.
Well, Miguel just did the up and under on Pol Espargaro and outsmarted him for a win.
I love how we now have, in MotoGP, we have the doctor and the dentist. Please, can we get a duel between them for the win so we can use that as a podcast title?
We've got all the medicine. We got all the medicine and dentistry industries covered in the MotoGP field very, very soon. But Miguel, he was jumping up and down. The tongue was out. Hugs all around. He'd won a brand new BMW M4 GT3 as well. He jumped on the car.
Yeah, that's about all it's good for. Have you seen that fucking new M4? Good God.
And there was me last week saying it was Dovi's problem now. Wrong, Dre! Wrong! Miguel was jumping up and down.
That's why Paul and Jack fought so hard. They didn't want to be saddled with the BMW.
No. It's funny you mentioned that. Jack was interviewed after the race and he said, I wanted to win the car because I wanted to give it to my mum. He wanted to give it back to his mum back home in Australia. But was 3 tenths short in the end. Yeah, all sorts of, as mentioned, all sorts of history made. The first ever Portuguese top flight winner. Tech 3's first ever win in MotoGP. We are 5 races in. We've not heard the Spanish anthem in the top flight so far this year. And,
Honda has won in British Superbike. They've won the Indy 500. And they've won in Formula 1 before they've achieved a podium in MotoGP.
That is just...
This is the...
Super GT as well.
It's going to be the weirdest Honda thanks day this year, guys.
Someone keep Mark off of the Super Cub. Yeah, I think you have to go back. I believe someone, Matt Oxley did the math on this. This is their worst start to a Grand Prix season since the oval piston NR 500 of the early 80s.
Yeah. The last pole position. Yeah, like I said, last pole position for a bike not manufactured in either Japan or Italy since Jeremy McWilliams on a Proton in Phillip Island in 2002.
Was
the last time a non-Japanese or Italian bike.
Remember Proton
on pole
in MotoGP?
Yeah, big shout out to Martin Raines, MotoGP Mart. He's a compiler of MotoGP stats. He's a bloody genius for this sort of thing. Another crazy one. The MotoGP winners so far this year, Quartararo ×2, Binder, Dovi, Oliveira. First time since 2000, there have been 5 races without either Rossi, Stoner, Lorenzo or Marquez winning.
Wow.
20 years, and you're taking out since
dominance of an era.
Yeah. Like I said, even 3 years ago, could you have ever imagined that a fight for the win would be behind an independent KTM,
a factory
KTM, like an independent Ducati, and a factory KTM? If King had said that, I'd have kicked him off the podcast.
And most of the race was led by a Suzuki.
And a Suzuki led around the power track in Austria for the first 2/3 of this race. Oh my god, let's run down this order because this is ridiculous to even break this all down. Miguel Oliveira wins in the end by 0.3 of a second over Jack Miller. Pol Espargaro was 3rd. There is apparently going to be another stewards meeting about this down the road because there's protests from Suzuki regarding Pol Espargaro and a certain last lap rule. I'll get back to that on that one. I promise you, it really is important.
Don't worry, guys. It's not the Mahias rule.
Thank God. I I've had to explain that shit 3 times already. Joan Mir was 4th in the end. Again, Mir, despite having a 28-year-old, 28-lap-old front tyre, was 6/10 off the win. It's crazy how this all just turned out. Dovi was 5th. He made a mistake on the penultimate lap. He just beat Alex Rins over the line by a nose for 5th and 6th. Taka Nakagami, another guy that you could say was probably robbed due to that red flag, was probably on course for a podium.
He is their only hope. He is the only Honda rider worth a damn right now.
Fun fact, only rider in the field to finish in the top 10 in every race so far this season.
Taka!
Brad Binder in 8th, again was in the lead group. He made a mistake, ran wide at turn 1 in the second restart. That did him in. Valentino Rossi was 9th. First top 10 for Ike Lequone, a good result from him there on the other Tech 3 KTM. Petrux 11th. Pardon me. Alicia Espargaro 12th. Yes, Fabio Quartararo down in 13th place. Somehow still leaves Austria as championship leader.
By the skin of his teeth. It's also, we didn't mention this with Vinales' crash. Brembo warned Yamaha and warned multiple riders up and down the grid to go with updated brake material because there were concerns about the last batch. Well, Vinales didn't heed that advice.
Yeah.
And even then, with the updated brake material, all, both the SRT Yamahas and the factory bikes all suffered problems.
I remember the red flag, they're all coming in, and Quartararo's riding alongside Rossi. He gives Rossi a nudge and he says, "How's your brakes working?" And Rossi just gives him the...
You know, on a 200-mile-per-hour motorcycle, this... The waving your hand,
no.
That is concerning, to say the least.
Especially on the track with, some of the heaviest braking zones on the calendar.
Yeah. 3 180-mile-an-hour braking zones on this track. I mean, Jesus. Johan Zarco finished 14th in the end. Actually, the red flag probably did him a really solid favour. It basically nullified his pit lane start in the end. So he's a lucky boy. He gets a couple of points in 14th. Again, we're talking about a man that was 7 seconds off the win in a 12-lap sprint race, and he finishes 14th. Frankie Morbidelli gets the last point in 15th out of Alex Marquez. Cal Crutchlow, who really is struggling out there. Great quote from Simon Patterson talking about it in the Redacted today, talking about how basically Honda ain't giving him shit. He wants Alex Marquez's data and gear to try and fix things on the bike, and they're not giving it to him at Honda right now.
It just feels
and that's part of the reason why he's struggling.
It just feels like without their Instafix for all their bikes' problems, seems like Honda's just running around with like a chicken with their head cut off.
Pretty much.
They don't know how to distribute data. They don't know how to make the bike work. And meanwhile, Taka looked over Marquez's data from last year, figured out what he could copy, what he couldn't copy, and is making last year's bike work, while the 2020 bike is languishing down out of the points for the most part.
Yeah, Cal said he's giving it all he can. He knows that, he says if he's got a decent bike and he's at 90% fitness, he'll get in the top 8. And that's about right for Cal. And
he's not this. He is not this as a rider.
He is bottom of the championship if you take out part-timers and guys that have missed races through injury. Cal Crutchlow is bottom of the championship. Perspective. Stefan Bradl 18th, Bradley Smith 19th, Michele Pirro 20th, Tito Rabat 21st, and the one DNF. Actually, for the whole race, I think, was just Maverick Vinales and that brake failure. Oh, indeed. Thankfully, Maverick okay. Mostly damaged ego and thinking, oh my god, please somebody give me a clean weekend. More than likely. Championship stands I'll go running through real quick. Quartararo has a 3-point lead in the championship now on 70. Dovi on 67. Look, I'm going to run down quite far, and I will say every guy who I think can still have a realistic chance of this championship. Miller, 56. Binder, 49. Maverick, 48. Taka, 46. Rossi, Yeah, the guy that DNF'd the first round of the year, 45. Only 25 points away. Rossi is within a race of the championship lead. Don't ask me how. Joan Mir, 44. Miguel Oliveira, 43. Paul Espargaro, 35. How is Paul only got 35 points through 5 rounds? Frankie Morbidelli
keeps throwing the bike in the gravel.
Right, Frankie, 32. Zarco, 30. Rins, 29. Rins is 41 points away. He's 13th in the championship.
1.4 shoulders.
Yeah. I reckon anyone in the top 13 can win this championship still, even at minus 41. Because Rins is very, very good.
There's no clear... Usually we have our clear front runner. And he's sitting at home. But now, now we've got what we had last year behind Marquez, which is just an angry bar fight of like 10 different riders just going at it every weekend.
It's worth a quick follow-up to say that Repsol Honda basically said that Marquez will now most likely be out for 2 to 3 months, probably for the rest of the season. Marquez has said, look, I'm respecting my body. I'm not getting back on the bike till I'm 100% fit. The reign of Marquez is over. We will be having a new MotoGP champion. And I was going to say, even at this point, if Marquez was set to come back at Misano next weekend, I'd have said he'd still have an outside chance at the title, given he's only minus 70.
No one's consistent
and 8
enough.
of the 9, and 8 of the 9 rounds left, besides the new edition of Portimao, Marquez won every single race on these tracks last year.
Yeah. It's terrifying to think that if he did come back, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. But yeah,
right.
HRC is more or less confirmed. I mean, 3 months from now is November. Pack it up.
Right.
Come back next year. Get your vengeance. Hope to God Honda fixes whatever's wrong with the front end of this bike. Because it just doesn't work.
Indeed. Whew. Okay, so that's MotoGP out of the way. And this arguably wasn't even the most controversial finish of the weekend, because we've got to talk about a little bit about Moto2. Because there was... This was crazy. Now, if you look at the timing sheets on the results page of MotoGP.com, which I do many a time as a nerd, you'll see... Wait, why does it say Jorge Martin finished 0 laps behind and in second place? Well, in Moto2, Jorge Martin led pretty much the entire race. Start to finish, actually. It was a leading group of 4 between Jorge Martin, Remy Gardner, Marco Bezzechi, and Tetsuya Nagashima. That was the lead group of 4. It spread out a little bit, but Bezzechi had passed Nagashima, he'd passed Remy Gardner about halfway through, and he was gaining on Martin about a couple of attempts a lap in the last 4 or 5 laps towards the end of the race. Now... This was interesting. Like, Bez was within a couple of attempts on the final lap. He wasn't even close enough to really even take a lunge at it, really. He couldn't even try a dive bomb. If the race was 1 lap longer, I reckon we would have gotten a classic last lap bar fight. We didn't get one. Martin wins the race going over the line. However... The stewards immediately take a look on the final corner, and it shows that Jorge Martin put 2 wheels off the curb and on the green at the final corner. Now, the general ruling has been you're allowed maybe 3 chances where you can run off track limits, during the race itself. You'll be given a warning if you do it 2 or 3 times. If you do it again, you'll be given the long lap penalty. We saw that in the Moto3 race, but what we also saw in the Moto3 race last week was the terrifying thought that on the final lap, there is 0 tolerance on track limits. We saw it in the Moto3 race last week when Vietti, Darren Binder, and Iagura were all told to drop a position after the flag because they all put 2 wheels off the curb on the final corner and they were deemed to have gained an advantage. Jorge Martin did the exact same thing, and within a minute or within 2 minutes of the race being over, the message flashes up on the bottom of the screen: track limits breach on final lap. Jorge Martin drop 1 position. Marco Bezzechi wins his first ever Moto2 race.
Yeah, this was an immediate slam dunk penalty.
Yeah.
It was the precedent we set last week.
We saw it last week.
You mentioned it with MotoGP.
Yeah, we mentioned it with
protest
MotoGP.
Going.
Yeah, Suzuki are protesting Pol Espargaro because Pol Espargaro was way off the curb on the final lap. And to be fair, it's probably not entirely Pol's fault. A lot of that was just because Jack Miller pushed him off because it was a dive bomb attempt on the final corner of the final lap.
He didn't gain any. It really wasn't of his own volition. And what was the gap between him and was it Mir, next place rider? What was the gap between them?
About 3 temps.
I can see where Suzuki's coming from.
If you're Suzuki, you've got no reason not to try it because
worst they can say is no.
Because even if you could make a case that Pol might have gained an advantage, even though he was pushed off, because he could still put his foot on the throttle, even though he was pushed off.
Yeah.
It's not the same as the Moto3 riders from last week who just went over the curb. There was mitigation with Pol where he's clearly been pushed off the apex. So there's a grey area there, and I know it's being looked at, but this was a slam dunk penalty. Like
we already have.
I'll be honest. I'll be honest. I fucking hate this rule. I just do.
It sucks.
It's a shit rule, but I understand why it exists. I understand why there's 0 tolerance on the final lap, because it's the ultimate gaining an advantage without... There's no counter. You can't counter that track limits penalty on the final lap.
Like, earlier on in the race, you could always, it's... The advantage is always vague, unless you blatantly overtake someone. On the final lap, you clearly know what the advantage is, because you'll see it the moment the rider crosses the finish line.
Yeah.
Right. And in this case, the video clearly shows that Martin is probably, I'd say, 3 inches on the green from where his tyres are at.
Yeah, this wasn't it wasn't really debatable.
Yeah.
It was pretty clear marginal on camera.
Yeah, he put 2 wheels on the green. And he was told to drop a position, which means he falls from first to second, and Marco Bezzechi inherited the win. Gotta just say, Marco Bezzechi is the new winner of the Shithousery Award for the year of 2020. Jason, get this in the nominations list, because if you watch immediately after the race, like Martin and Bezzechi pull up alongside each other off the turn 1 apex, and they give each other a big, hearty hug. They were big rivals. People forget they were big rivals in Moto3. They weren't the best of mates, but they always had very big respect for each other as riders. So Bez gives him a big hug, says congratulations, and then 2 minutes later, Bez finds out he wins the race. He inherits the win off of the back of the penalty. He tells the media after the race that apparently Bez saw that Martin had put 2 wheels on the green, and he said he knew he was going to win the race after he saw that Martin had put 2 wheels off. So he celebrates with the man and says, well done, gives him a pat on the back and a big hearty hug, even though he knew he was about to win the race.
Oh, man.
Ultimate shithousery from Marco Bezzechi.
Cold as ice.
Oh. Shithousery 101 from Marco Bezzechi. I demand that be in the nomination list at the end of the year for the Motorsport 101 awards, because that is cold-blooded from Marco Bezzechi. Oh, my God. Beautiful. A hilarious case of shithousery. Also, one other minus before I give it a very quick rundown afterwards as well. Sam Lowes did not cover himself in glory in this race. A very early incident where he basically turned himself into a bowling ball, had a false neutral, couldn't control his bike going into the turn 3 hairpin, and he clattered into Somikat Chantra and Jorge Navarro in the early periods of the race. And I was like, wow, Sam Lowes is at it again, I see. He's back in 2017 form. It was an ugly one. Luckily, everybody walked away from it okay. Lowes was able to continue, but I thought it was hilarious. He was actually given the black flag. He was disqualified from the race for irresponsible riding, and I'm like,
you got yoked.
Wow.
You got yoked
You
out
got
of
yanked. Yeah, I was like, whoa, they black flagged him for irresponsible. Like, are we going back to the 4-stroke era? Is this the early 2000s again? Like, we're DQing people for dirty riding. I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. Not that it mattered because Lowe's crashed again, like seconds after the black flag penalty was announced, and I was just like, basically. So, not that the black flag really didn't matter, but yeah. Sam Lowe's disqualified. That's a rare one in MotoGP. A disqualification for Sam Lowe's for idiotic driving and a pit lane start at Misano next time round as well. They really threw the book at Sam Lowe's on that one. Although apparently he texted Neil Hodgson after the race saying, I got a false neutral. Yeah, go away. We don't believe you need more people. Bez took the win, Jorge Martin second. Remy Gardner back on the podium, good for him. His first podium since Argentina last year, so good for Remy Gardner on that one. I've said it before, the SAG team is running last year's frame. They're skint. And Gardner put it third, a great result from him. Nagashima fourth. Tom Luthi, the gatekeeper, is back. P5, good for him. We like Tom Luthi on this show. Xavi Vierge sixth, Luca Marini seventh. One for the BT Sport guys to cream over. Jake Dixon, eighth. Jake Dixon has a result. Yay! And the Americans go mild over here.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Well, on the nose. Good for Jake Dixon, but, you know, yeah. Hector Garzo 9th. N.A. Bastianini 10th. Marcel Schrotter 11th. Joe Roberts 12th. Nicola Budiga 13th. Stefano Manzi 14th. And Lorenzo Baldassari 15th. Rounding off the points in the end. Again, another DNF for Augusto Fernandez as well. Ooh, last year's target contenders are going down like flies. MotoGP World Championship standings, by the way. Luca Marini has an 8-point lead over Bastianini and Martin, now joint second. Nagashima fourth on 68, and Bez now on 65. Bunching in quite nicely there in Moto2, actually. That could be interesting to keep an eye on going forward. Another new winner in Moto3 as well, before we get out of town here. Celestino Vietti wins his first Moto3 race. He won it in a almost David Rudisha style. I'm going to go as fast as I can on this final lap and see if you can catch me. And no one did. Basically, he broke him up on the final lap and no one had an answer for him in the end. Vietti takes his first ever Moto3 win. Thankfully, didn't break the glass bottle this time on the podium. I think he's learned his lesson from Jerez. Tony Arbolino in second, and Ayagura once again sneaking his way into the top positions, finishing third. Gabi Rodrigo fourth, Albert Arenas fifth, Darren Binder sixth, Suzuki seventh, Fernandez eighth, Nepa, Garcia, Foggia, Salach, Mino, Jalmasia, and Ryusuke Yamanaka. Rounding off the points. Also, if one unfortunate highlight was both Tech 3s in Moto 3 hitting each other. Ayumu Sasaki and Dennis Onshu having a big impact going into turn 1. Onshu doing about 15 barrel rolls on concrete, which was a bit wincy on the eye to see that. Thank God they won like 2 hours later. Basically, otherwise that would have been a pretty disastrous weekend for Tech 3, all told. And John McPhee binned it with 2 laps to go. There was much tears in the BT Sports studio on that one. Moto 3 Championship standings real quick. Albert Arenas on 106. He has a 25-point lead on Ayagura. John McPhee on 67, Vietti on 66, Arbolino on 60, and Suzuki on 59. Guys, if you haven't seen it already, go out and see this race. It is a 10 out of 10. It was on the Dre.
No, it's better.
It was on the Dre. Are you fucking kidding me? Out of 10. It's a rare race that touches that esteemed level on Dre's race review system. This is an all-time classic. For
race of the
many
year
reasons,
so far.
for guys involved, for drama, You know, for guys, again, for the fact we had new names up there, for excitement, for one of the most iconic final corners maybe in MotoGP history. One that's going to be up there with Rossi Gibernau 05 in Jerez and some of the Marquez Dovi last corner incidents we've had over the years. That one's right up there. It's a 9 out of 10 race with a 15 out of 10 finish. It's one of those ones you'll see on What Happened Next clip compilations for years to come. It's a brilliant.
This is
finish.
one of those races that MotoGP will make free to watch as a must-see all-time classic.
Oh god, yeah. What an
Please
unbelievable race that was.
Go out of your way to see it. It was that good.
Yeah, it was an unbelievable.
I woke up because I didn't watch it live. I watched it after the fact. I just look at the podium and just like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah, and
that doesn't tell
Miguel Oliveira,
not even a quarter of the story.
That's just it. You can look at Miguel Oliveira winning and thinking like that in itself would be a surprise. How we got there is even more ridiculous.
Yeah.
And my god, like. KTM has 2 wins this year. 2. They've lost their concessions. Aprilia is the only concession team in the field now. Who would have guessed this a year ago? That KTM, who were dead on arrival, have now got to cough up their concessions because they have 2 dry wins.
You're too good.
Too good. Oh, Lord.
Wipe that grin off your face, Ryan.
Smug bastard. KTM has arguably 3 title contenders right now. I can't stand this timeline. Get me out of here. I'm ending this show right here and now. We're getting out of here. YouTube.com/Motorsport101. You know, find this if you haven't there already. Our social media is in the handles. Twitter at Motorsport_101 if you want to find our official podcast Twitter on there. Our usernames are in the description. They're in our handles here at Harrison101HD, at Ryan Eric King, at CBuckley917. We're on Facebook.com/Motorsport101. And if you'd like to back us financially, you can on Patreon. Patreon.com, not Twitter, /Motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of the audio episodes we have. $10 gets you into the supporters club of our Discord server where you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded. And you get early access to the video versions of the podcast in full before they're made available to the public. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week to talk about the Belgian Grand Prix and both IndyCar races at Gateway. So that should be a fun time. All of that and much, much more. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Ryan King and Cam Buckley. See you next week. Sayonara.
Bye.
Stay safe, everyone. For God's sake, Vinales, just take a chill pill this weekend.
God. Sit this one out, bro.